Holden 308 V8 was a powerhouse that could have changed the automotive world until it was suddenly discontinued in the 2000s. What if we told you that its demise wasn't due to performance, but corporate politics? The shocking truth behind its shutdown will leave you questioning what could have been. There was a time when Australia had its very own V8 engine, built not in America but right here at home. It was the Holden 308 V8, an engine that powered some of the greatest Aussie muscle cars. From the roaring Tiranas to the legendary Commodores, this V8 became a symbol of raw power and racing success. But there's a twist in the tale. This mighty engine, which once ruled the streets and racetracks, was later banned. How did it go from being a champion to an outlaw? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning, the birth of a legend. The story begins in 1965 when Holden realized it needed a V8 of its own. Ford and Chrysler had already introduced their powerful V8s, and Holden didn't want to be left behind. But there was a problem. Instead of simply copying an American V8, Holden wanted something unique, an engine designed specifically for Australian roads and conditions. That's when two brilliant engineers, Fred James and Ed Sillins, stepped in to create something special. However, Holden had two choices: import and modify an American V8 or build an entirely new one. They decided to take the harder but more rewarding path. The result was a V8 that took inspiration from Chevrolet, Buick and Oldsmobile engines, but had a design of its own. It was smaller, lighter and compact, making it perfect for the Australian market. With a cast-iron block and aluminum parts, it weighed around 460 pounds, much less than its American rivals. The first roar. By 1966, Holden engineers had their first prototype. It was a 253 cubic inch engine, and it was ready for testing. But things didn't go smoothly. The first time they fired it up, it failed. Metal shavings in the oil pump caused a complete breakdown. But Holden didn't give up. They fixed the issues and kept testing. Soon, they had a powerful, reliable V8 that was ready to take on Ford's famous 289 XR GT. In 1969, the world finally got to see what Holden had built. The first 253 V8 was introduced in the HT series, followed by the bigger and more powerful 308 V8. The 308 had a 4.00-inch bore and a 3.06-inch stroke, giving it serious muscle. It came with a Rochester Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor, pushing out 240 horsepower. It wasn't just strong, it had a deep, thunderous sound that became legendary, from streets to racetracks. The Holden 308 V8 wasn't just for street cars. It became a favourite on the racetrack, dominating competitions like the Australian Touring Car Championship. Holden even created special racing versions, like the L34 Tirana in 1974, which had a modified 308 with high-performance parts. Engineers at Repco took it even further, turning it into a 495 horsepower Formula 5000 race engine that could rev past 8,000 RPM. Racing wasn't just a hobby for Holden, it was a battlefield. But the 308 V8 was more than just a weapon. It was Holden's ticket to dominance. And when you dominate too much, people start to get nervous. The 308 was already proving itself on the streets and racetracks. But in 1980, Holden decided to take things up a notch. That's when the XT5 high-performance upgrade came in. To mark this change, they even switched the engine's color from red to blue. It wasn't just for looks, this was a sign of power. Then, in 1981, Holden pushed things even further. They introduced the V5H version of the 308 for the VH Commodore. This beast had 177 kilowatts at 4,700 RPM and 418 Newton-meters of torque at 3,500 RPM. Those numbers might not seem shocking today, but back then it was a game changer. For the first time, a rear-wheel power figure equaled the original flywheel power of the 308. That was a big deal. 1 year later, the HD TSS Group 3 model took the V5H even further. It had revised cylinder heads, a brand new intake manifold, and a better exhaust system. These upgrades made the engine breathe better, producing more power and making the 308 an even bigger threat on the track. A radical change. Holden wasn't done yet. In 1984, something huge happened. The 308 got a major update, and the engine block casting now had a new name, 5.0. This was because Holden had dropped the smaller 253 engine and wanted to make the 308 the main V8 in their lineup. But that wasn't the only change. Later that same year, Holden made a controversial decision. They shortened the stroke of the 308 by 1 millimeter, bringing the total displacement to 4,997 cubic centimeters, or 304 cubic inches. This new version required a different crankshaft, rods, pistons, and camshaft. Some old-school fans weren't happy. They felt Holden was messing with a legendary engine, but Holden had a plan. They coded this new engine as LV2 or A9L, and it became the heart of the VK Group ASS, one of Holden's most iconic racing machines. This time, the engine was painted black, as if to announce that it meant business, pushing the limits of the Holden 308 V8. Well, Holden's engineers were never afraid to push the boundaries of performance. When the VL Commodore came out, they unveiled an even more powerful version of the 304 cubic inch engine. HSV, Holden Special Vehicles, went all out, creating a Group A model with electronic fuel injection, a first for Holden's V8 lineup. This was a huge leap forward, as previous Holden V8s had relied on carburetors. With the arrival of the VN Commodore, Holden took things even further. They renamed the engine to 5000 V8, but this wasn't just a rebranding. The engine received a major overhaul with a new block drilled to match Chevrolet's bolt pattern, allowing it to use parts from Chevy's famous small block engines. The carburetor was replaced with a modern GM Delco multi-point fuel injection system, significantly improving fuel delivery and efficiency. By 1994, Holden introduced the L98 version, pushing the engine's displacement to 5.7 litres. This move was a game-changer. The extra displacement gave Holden a serious edge over Ford's high-performance V8s and made the Holden engine more competitive in the performance car market. But Holden wasn't done yet. In their constant pursuit of performance, they developed the 355 cubic inch stroker kit for the 308 engine, taking it to an entirely new level. This stroker kit increased the engine's displacement by lengthening the stroke of the pistons, boosting the engine's cylinder volume, and improving combustion efficiency. The result? A significant increase in torque and horsepower makes it a powerful choice for those seeking more performance. Beyond this, that modification allows the SLR Tirana, for example, to compete with and often outperform more modern vehicles, making it an attractive option for those seeking enhanced performance. Not only this, Precision Performance, known for its attention to detail, uses high-quality materials in its stroker kits. The kit includes forged pistons, high-performance crankshafts, and connecting rods specifically designed to withstand the stresses of high horsepower. These components ensure that the engine can handle the increased power and maintain its reliability under demanding conditions. Additionally, the stroker kit optimizes the combustion chamber design, which improves airflow and fuel efficiency. This results in better fuel economy without sacrificing power, making the engine not only more powerful but also more practical for both daily driving and performance-oriented use. Every component of the stroker kit is manufactured using precise engineering techniques, ensuring a perfect fit with the Holden 308 engine. This expert engineering guarantees that the engine will operate with the utmost reliability, durability, and longevity, allowing it to continue delivering exceptional performance for years to come. The Holden V8's final years. By the late 1990s, Holden's V8 was still going strong, but times were changing. Racing teams started switching to Chevrolet V8s. The Holden 308 was still a monster, but it was becoming harder to justify keeping it around when the competition was using more advanced technology. That didn't stop Larry Perkins from sticking with the Holden V8 in his VP Commodore. While most teams had moved on, Perkins proved that the Holden engine still had plenty of fight left in it. In 1993, he took pole position at Bathurst and went on to win the race, beating some of the best teams in the business. At the same time, car enthusiasts weren't ready to let go of the 308. Performance parts were everywhere, and companies like COME and MOTEC started offering high-performance twin-throttle body setups. People were finding new ways to squeeze every bit of power out of the engine. Holden even started experimenting with radical ideas. One of the wildest was a 24-valve version of the V8, featuring 3 valves per cylinder and single overhead cams on each bank. This prototype, built by engineers Lee Maguire and Mick Webb, was meant to show that the 308 could be modernized for export markets. It worked, but internal politics at General Motors meant it never saw the light of day. Powerhouse. Just when it seemed like the 308 V8 might have a second life, let's talk about what made this engine such a powerhouse in the first place. The Holden V8 was a water-cooled, naturally aspirated gasoline engine with 8 cylinders arranged in a 90-degree V-shape. This design was compact, powerful, and simple to maintain. Unlike newer overhead cam engines, the 308 used an overhead valve OHV setup with 2 valves per cylinder. The camshaft sat inside the engine block right above the crankshaft and was connected by a timing chain. This old-school setup kept the engine reliable and easy to modify. To make sure everything ran smoothly, the camshaft also powered the distributor and oil pump. But Holden didn't stop there. The 308's valve actuation system used hydraulic lifters and push rods to move the rocker arms, making maintenance easier. Some later models even featured roller lifters for better efficiency. The engine block itself was made from solid cast iron, giving it strength, but also making it a little on the heavy side. A separate pressed steel sump housed the oil, and the crankshaft was held in place by 5 main bearings. In high-performance versions, Holden even upgraded to 4-bolt main caps for extra durability. Cooling was another interesting part of the design. A belt-driven radiator fan and water pump sat at the front of the engine, both powered by the main pulley. This simple system kept temperatures in check, but early versions had a major flaw: the cylinder heads. That's where things got tricky. The first 308 cylinder heads had a mirrored valve layout, meaning the exhaust valves in the middle were right next to each other. This created a dangerous hotspot, leading to warping and cracking, especially in high-performance applications. In 1988, Holden finally redesigned the heads, switching to a new intake exhaust pattern that improved cooling and durability. By then, though, trouble was already brewing for the engine's future, from racing star to racing outlaw. With all its strengths and weaknesses, the 308 V8 had one clear purpose: performance. That's why it found a home in some of Australia's most legendary cars. The engine was supposed to debut in 1968, but Holden ran into delays. Instead, it hit the market in 1969 inside the HT series. At first, it competed with Chevrolet's 350 V8, but by 1974, Holden's homegrown power plant took center stage. The 308 wasn't just for family sedans either. It powered luxury cars like the Statesman and muscle machines like the Torana. One of the most exciting moments for the 308 came in 1985, when Holden started shrinking the engine slightly for Group A racing. The new size, 304 cubic inches, allowed racing teams to compete at a lower weight while keeping the same power. That meant bigger tires, better handling, and more speed on the track. The result? The 308-powered VK Commodore SS Group A became a force to be reckoned with in international touring car racing. But not everyone was happy about that. The 308 was already under fire from stricter emissions laws, and racing regulators were paying close attention. When fuel injection replaced carburetors in the VL Commodore SS Group A SV, it was clear that Holden was trying to keep the 308 competitive. However, it wasn't enough. In 1990, things took a dramatic turn. As racing rules continued to evolve, Holden's beloved V8 started to lose its edge. By the time the VS3 Commodore utility came out in 2000, the 308 was officially on borrowed time. Racing organizations had moved on, and even Holden knew it couldn't hold back change forever. That didn't mean the 308 disappeared quietly. High-performance versions kept popping up in special editions, and HSV, Holden Special Vehicles, pushed the engine even further. By 1994, they introduced a stroker version, 5.7 litres of pure Aussie muscle. This upgrade kept the 308 alive in cars like the HSV GTS and Senator, but the writing was on the wall. As the 1990s wore on, the 308 was a shadow of its former self. While it had become a symbol of Aussie pride, it was also a reminder of how corporate politics had strangled its potential. Despite its continued success on the streets and tracks, it was clear that GM had bigger plans, and they didn't involve the 308. The new era, Chevrolet LS1 takes over. By the late 1990s, Holden had to face the inevitable. General Motors, in its drive to standardize powertrains across the globe, decided to phase out the 308. The American company's vision was clear: the Chevrolet LS1 would take over. This move was part of GM's wider strategy to consolidate engine technology across their brands. The LS1 was lighter, more fuel-efficient, and had modern technology that the 308 simply couldn't match anymore. For car enthusiasts, this was a hard pill to swallow. The 308 had powered some of Holden's most iconic cars, including the Commodore and the Tirana. It had been the engine behind numerous motorsport victories, including multiple Bathurst 1000 wins, and it had earned a special place in the hearts of many Aussies. But as much as they loved the 308, they couldn't deny that the LS1 offered more for the future. But GM's move to kill off the 308 wasn't as simple as swapping one engine for another. It wasn't just about performance, it was about control. GM was consolidating power, and Holden's cherished V8 was collateral damage. The 308 had been too good, too successful, so much so that it had started to compete with the best American models, including the legendary Chevrolet Corvette. Holden's engineers, however, weren't giving up without a fight. They continued to develop and refine the 308, pushing it further even as they faced an uncertain future. While the LS1 was replacing it in the newer models, the 308's legacy lived on in the performance variants that kept the flame burning. The 308 in the late 1990s. In the last years of its life, the 308 found itself in a battle between its past and future. Holden Special Vehicles took the engine to new heights, releasing models like the HSV GTS and the Senator. These cars were built for enthusiasts who craved the raw power and sound of the 308. And despite the shift to the LS1, the final versions of the 308 had an unmistakable Aussie character that the imported engines couldn't replicate. For a while, it seemed like the 308 would survive in limited edition models as HSV continued to squeeze more power from the aging engine. In fact, by 1999, when the final 308-powered models rolled off the production line, the engine was still putting out respectable numbers, 240 to 260 horsepower in its best form. But no matter how much Holden tried to keep the 308 alive, it was only a matter of time before the LS1 would take over completely. This wasn't just about the engine's performance anymore. External factors played a huge role in the 308's decline. The 1979 oil crisis had pushed fuel prices to new heights, while worldwide emissions regulations were becoming stricter. Australia, which had once lagged behind Europe and the US in environmental laws, now had to catch up. Holden's engineers were ahead of the curve, though. They had already developed solutions, including a microprocessor-controlled engine management system that reduced emissions while maintaining 302 horsepower. Craig Watson, a former Holden engineer, revealed that they had a prototype with electronic fuel injection and exhaust gas recirculation that would have met 1985 emissions standards. But GM wouldn't approve it. Instead, Holden's resources were diverted to global engine projects, with GM prioritizing Chevrolet and Cadillac. While GM invested over $500 million in American V8 development, Holden's total engineering budget in 1981 was just $24 million, less than 5% of what their American counterparts received. The 308's impact on Australian cars. Even after its retirement, the 308's legacy didn't fade away. The engine had become a piece of Australia's automotive identity, representing the country's engineering ability and love for high-performance cars. The 308 was more than just an engine. It was a symbol of what Australia could achieve in motorsport and car manufacturing. When the LS1 finally replaced the 308, there was a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The LS1 was a better engine in many ways, but it didn't have the same history or emotional connection for Aussies. For many, the 308 was the true heart of Holden's muscle cars, the engine that made them feel like they were part of something bigger. While the new engines brought better fuel efficiency and cleaner emissions, they didn't quite capture the raw, unfiltered power that the 308 had provided. The 308 was a true Aussie muscle machine, and even though the world had moved on, it remained a benchmark for what Holden had once achieved. The final days of the 308th. Holden had no choice. By the year 2000, the last production 308 rolled off the assembly line. It had been a staple of Australian muscle cars for over 30 years, powering everything from race-winning Commodores to high-performance HSV models. But in the end, it wasn't emissions, fuel economy, or lack of power that killed it. It was corporate politics. The LS1 took over, and while it was a strong engine, it never had the same character as the 308. It was an American engine in an Australian car. It didn't have the same roar, the same toughness, or the same history. For die-hard Holden fans, it felt like the end of an era, legacy. But was the 308 really gone? That's the part GM didn't expect. Even after the last official Holden-built 308 left the factory, the engine refused to disappear. Performance shops across Australia kept building and modifying them. Tuners found ways to extract even more power, and street racers refused to let it fade into history. Even today, decades after its supposed death, the 308 is still a favourite among Australian muscle car enthusiasts. It remains a symbol of a time when Holden wasn't just another division of GM, but a company that built its own powerful, unique engines. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.